And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us, and one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight's episode, we're going to be joined by my guest, Wes. We're going to talk about some of the weird things going on around in New Jersey, specifically the Jersey Devil, and some of the other locations out there that Wes wants to talk about. Before we bring him on, though, if you've ever had an experience and you'd like to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, there's a couple things you can do. You can either send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Just make sure to reach out and get a message to me, and we will get something scheduled for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast out, please share it around. Word of mouth is the best way of helping the podcast out. You can also leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to Tinfoil Tales at, and that helps me fight the algorithms. You can also become a member of the Patreon. You get early access to all the episodes, and they're all ad-free. It's only $1.99 a month, so it's worth checking out. Find more information about that in the show notes. And you can also follow me around all the social medias, Facebook and Instagram. But we are going to go ahead now and bring Wes on. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Wes. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Been doing the Words and Coffee podcast for about a year now. It was kind of a natural segue getting into interesting urban legends and history about New Jersey. I say segue because it was sort of research that I was doing for the books that I write. I do historical fiction, largely centered around the 1920s interwar period. Whole lot of gangster and industrial accidents and stuff that happened in that period, which is just really interesting to just completely geek out on. So, and as I did that, I started finding the real life stories and weird sightings and hauntings and all this stuff that comes up over the years that people talk about. So just love getting into that whole thing, supernatural aspect, the historical aspect, and yeah, just love talking about it.
There's a lot of weird stuff that's around historically. Like when you start to dig into like historical things, there's a lot of weird supernatural stories that are out there, and I don't know how true any of them can be or like with the urban legends and everything else, but there's always folklore from something, and you have to wonder what caused the folklore. Like, where'd the myths come from? Where'd these stories originate from? There had to have been something that started this, even not just here in America, but like everywhere. You had fairy tales and everything. Like, what inspired all of that is what I always kind of think about, because for me, it's like they had to have seen something in order to write stuff about it. I don't know. That's just what I think.
You're actually pretty on the mark there. So you know, in the case of Jersey, obviously our big namesake is the Jersey Devil.
Mhm.
It's got our name in it. That's the big one for us. I think there's something like I looked this up at one point. There's like 10 or 15 states that have a designated state cryptid. So New Jersey's in that short list, which is kind of cool. But in the case of the Jersey Devil, it actually seems to have an origin story in Lenni Lenape, native tribe that lived in the New Jersey region. And so as the European settlers moved in, they shared the same woods, they kind of encountered the same creatures, and a lot of what eventually evolved into the Jersey Devil legend that we have today uh, bears a lot of resemblance to this forest spirit that the Lenni Lenape described, which is kind of cool. It's uh, I don't mean to jump the gun here, but the Jersey Devil is kind of this winged bipedal deer looking thing. Kind of like a cross between a Wendigo and like a deer, basically. And the Lenni Lenape kind of described a similar thing. So you just see where it, like you said, it has an origin in uh, going back, hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on what people encountered in the woods at some point. I was out one time and I heard a mountain lion somewhere in the distance, and like that's terrifying. So
Now,
stuff like that, you can see where people would like, all right, terrifying animal. Maybe that's something else.
how are you like when you heard a mountain lion? What did it sound like? Was it like a more of a I've heard, and I don't know, maybe I'm confusing this, but like mountain lions sound like someone screaming. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. That's weird to me in general because you hear the word lion and you see a lion like an African lion roaring, but then you hear a mountain lion and everyone says, "Oh, it sounds like someone out in the woods screaming." Like, well, that's weird. Makes you wonder if a
Yeah.
lot of times you hear things like this and people are actually thinking someone's out there screaming and it's really just an animal.
Yeah, especially with something like foxes. Like it
Hmm.
actually sounds like kids yelling. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Like I myself have, I don't think I've actually heard it per se that way, but like I've heard that they claim that when foxes and I think even like coyotes yipping or whatever, sometimes people confuse them for like little kids.
Yeah, it's pretty eerie. And like you can definitely see where, in the case of something like that, you uh get the legends of skinwalkers and stuff. It's like, no, it sounded like a person, but it was an animal.
I think a lot of Native American stories are all based off of their old. It's strange, like you mentioned Skinwalker. That's like a Navajo thing, and Wendigos. I think were more of the northern nations type stuff. But if you start to look into a lot of their old lores, there were similarities to certain aspects. Like I'm not saying they're the same thing at all, but there's still some similarities in between certain things. And I think a lot of them are spiritual. I think some of them are not. I don't know where the stories got intertwined, but for me, it seems to be like these stories were passed down and then they got altered as they got to different tribes and different things, but they all spoke different languages and they all had their own versions of stuff. So it is just weird to me how some of these things have passed through. So it always goes back, like I said, what inspired the story?
It's a good question. It's interesting that you bring up the aspect of different experiences kind of mixing together and getting retold. Because I mean, so the Lenni Lenape legend didn't start out as it was like I said, the elongated deer thing, but how do you get from that to Leeds Devil and then later Jersey Devil? And that's kind of where, in this case, the story kind of takes an interesting turn because it, like, I think you had the original, like, I think in part it probably came from an animal or something, you know, fairly mundane. But then as people get involved in the story and it kind of takes on a life of its own. We got really creative before we had Netflix. You just had people sitting around the campfire and shooting stuff back and forth, and the interesting stories that come out of your particular village or tribe, and how that can kind of transform.
I think like just in my general area, we have a local tribe, and I'm going to be talking to one of the people here soon from the tribe about some of the local legends we have around here based off of their stories and everything. Here,
That's cool.
a lot of the stuff that I keep being told about our, I'll say the overused phrase of high strangeness, but that goes on in my general area, a lot of people relate it to the tribe that was here, and there are still some here. But I don't think that's all true. I think a lot of people have, and I don't want to sound like a douche, but we've bastardized their stories, their traditions. We've turned them into more fantastical things, and then we use them as like, this is their old stories. I was like, I don't want to talk to someone that don't really know anything. I'd rather go right to the source. So I've got stuff lined up where I'm going to talk with them because I would rather know directly from them like what their stories actually are rather than hearing it secondhand, third hand, or who the hell knows how many hands it's been.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely use the word bastardization, but a a watering down almost. When other people get their say in the story, like uh, I was only able to find one source that mentioned the whole Native American aspect of the Jersey Devil, and then I don't know if that's authors' sources were buried in a university library or something somewhere, but was only able to find the one reference to it. And then from there, the European settlers, this part of the country was heavily settled by the Quakers, who were kind of the hippies of their time. They were very, egalitarian, very open-minded, which is, probably why they, had a lot of story swapping and trading with uh, the native tribes of the area, and how the legend got introduced in the first place, really. But they interpreted the whole thing through a Christian lens. So, oh, this scary demonic entity stalking the woods, kind of sounds like a devil. All right, boom, we got the devil introduction to the story. Call it a bastardization, call it a hybridizing, but
Mm-hmm.
that's like the first step in uh, modifying the existing legend to kind of be adapted by this new culture.
Right. Everything that you hear with the word devil in it is like, well, I was like, that's not what they originally called it. Like the Devil's Gorge or the Devil's Triangle or something. They added in there to give it that mystiqueness, to make it seem even more sinister because we're throwing that name in it. So, like the Jersey Devil, they had to modernize it, I guess, at the times for all of the stuff for the white settlers, which you mentioned Wendigo earlier, and I'm pretty sure the original depictions of a Wendigo, they were actually just pale human looking figures, spirit things. But
Right.
the modernized version, and every time it says a Wendigo, you think of the big beast with the antlers and skull and everything else. I don't believe that's what the original Native American versions were. So again, is that us turning it into a more fantastical thing over the years, or as weird as this may be, but like sometimes people are reporting seeing these things now. So is that something because we've put it out there in the ether that it's now manifested? People think this is what they're seeing because we've made like a tulpa out of it. Who knows? Same thing with people that see Shadow Man or Slender Man. I've always thought that was weird because that was a creepy pasta that someone made up, and now people report seeing that thing all the time.
Never underestimate what people will convince themselves of in order to get a little bit of attention.
I won't say that
Yeah,
what people see is not what they think they're seeing, but I don't necessarily think that everything out there that people see is what they think it is. So I'm not saying that I've seen some weird stuff too. So I can't go on record and say I don't believe in any of that stuff, but I try and remain grounded. So I try and keep a skeptical mind. But I'm not going to argue with someone. If they said they've seen something, I want to say, well, you must have saw something because who am I to say you didn't? I wasn't there.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not. I agree. I wouldn't go so far as to say that. At the end of the day, I think there is more to existence than what we think we understand, and I think that leaves a lot of room for explanations.
Is there anything with the Jersey Devil, like with the origins and everything? Has there been anything close to what anyone's actually physically had proof of that you're aware of? Or is it all just stories that were passed down?
So, fast forwarding a little bit, um, probably the most significant series of sightings was in 1909. But a lot of people, reported seeing it to varying degrees, everything from a fluttering sound in the distance to hoof prints to, red eyes to this one guy who claimed he was actually attacked by it. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of those. So, in the one case, the guy who said he was attacked by it happened to be leaving a saloon, said, red lights came out of the dark and knocked him down, and it was moving as fast as an automobile. Mm, who knows? Could have been. I mean, a lot of these sightings, okay, so the Jersey Devils stomping grounds are supposed to be in this place called the Pine Barrens. So in New Jersey, that's like our more rural southern region. A lot of pine trees, a lot of woods. Um, has a certain reputation. Yeah, I say it has a reputation. It's kind of a signed reputation by urban types who kind of, look down their nose at their rustic, quote unquote, inferiors. In fact, there's historical precedent that kind of fed into the Jersey legend or the Jersey Devil legend back in colonial times as well. But sticking with the 1909 sightings for now. What's fun about this one is the newspapers were printing it like as far away as Virginia. Um, there was like a 1 week period in the middle of January, just followed this big snowstorm, and there were a few inches of snow on the ground. So there's uh, prints and tracks all over the place that people are following. Uh, I kind of draw parallels to the 1938 War of the Worlds broadcast, which I don't know how familiar you are with that, but basically Orson Welles narrated a radio broadcast of the novel War of the Worlds, but like people would tune in halfway through it and think that there's actually an attack going on and the whole mass hysteria thing. So
Hmm.
again, you see that it's kind of a pattern emerging here. But yeah, in 1909, bunch of sightings. People were in a trolley car in oh, where was that one? I think that was outside of Glassboro. All South Jersey towns was kind of in this area, and then you had groups of guys going out into the woods doing vigilante hunts, and honestly, I think a lot of that was just an excuse for them to go in the woods with their friends, have a couple beers, and shoot some trees. Seems plausible, but so the punchline with the 1909 sightings is that a week later, there was this dime museum in Philadelphia. um, with this guy claimed to have caught the Jersey Devil. And so the thing about a dime museum is it's kind of like an old-timey tourist trap. Um, they'd have stuff like strongman exhibits, kind of sort of like a circus freak show sort of vibe. And so basically what this guy did was he took a kangaroo, painted it with green stripes, glued bat wings to it, uh, and would walk it out into this dimly lit room, give people like, 2 seconds to see it, and then he'd quickly usher it out of the room again. And that was the culmination of one of the most significant rash of sightings for the Jersey Devil.
It's weird to think that people were that gullible back in those days, which I say that in those days, but even today, I still think there might be people who would fall into that category.
YouTube would like a word.
Right. I off topic, but not really. Someone had posted something, and I could clearly instantly tell it was AI generated. And they were claiming that they were able to tell from being a professional and some sort of field that they were in or whatever that this is 100% a real photo. And I was like, I can totally tell instantly that it's not a real photo. And I'm not going to argue with someone on the internet and be in that old echo chamber, but I'm like, it clearly looks fake in the sense of things just don't seem correct. And AI has a typical thing about itself. Like, I don't know why, but sometimes when it's drawing things or making images, it usually has some sort of like a walking stick or a cane or something to it, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But this thing was supposed to be like a giant and it had a cane it was leaning on. I'm like, I don't
Was it at least theme appropriate? Was like a giant oak tree that the giant was using as a cane?
know. It was a giant standing next to somebody else. And it was supposed to look like an old time photo. This thing was supposed to be like a 15-foot tall giant. You could, everything about it to me, I've seen it posted so many different times, but I see so many people trying to defend it. And I see things like there's a Bigfoot photo that the guy that made it literally came out and said after he released it, this is all AI and he was doing it to warn people. They still pass it around that it's 100% real. I was like, the guy that made it is admitted that it's not real. He did it to show people not to believe everything, and yet they're still saying that that's not true and that this is real. I was like, what point do you become obsessed with wanting something so bad that you know it's not real, but you're going to use it anyways? You're just already making it very hard for anyone to take you seriously.
Some people just love to argue on Facebook. Like I actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I ran afoul of this a couple weeks ago. Um, I've been posting like interesting newspaper clippings that I find.
Mm.
And going back 100 years, there's not a whole lot of pictures in the papers at that time. It's text only. So I thought I'd spice it up a little bit by making a quick little uh, period representative photo as just a like a visual aid. And like someone made the mistake of it's like, oh wow, it's crazy. That's what it looked like back then. And then I stepped in it. This was on me. It's like, oh no, no, actually that's AI generated. I just threw it in there as a visual, and like people got like war with the machines level of irate over it. It was crazy. It's like, how could you do that? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, dude, I said it's AI generated. This is obvious to me. I don't know how you would mistake that guy has 4 fingers. I guess four is the easier one. Six is where it gets weird. But they're working on the finger count. That's improving.
There are certain ones that are out there that are very detailed, but there's still a little bit about them that's not that you can somewhat detect. But I don't know if I've ever talked about this on air, and I might get sued if I do, but I'm going to anyways. So I guess I
Oh,
won't name the one. I'll just that's why and keep me out of issues. But I was one of the first testers. Like, I'm not going to say the first, but I was one of the few beta testers of one of these prevalent AI generators. And the area that it was from, you had to start paying. It was free for a while, but then they wanted you to start paying to get new credits in order to keep generating things. And this is before I even
Mm.
started the show or anything like it, but I liked making this stuff. I thought it was fun. Just not that I'm making it, but just seeing what type of stuff I could create with it. I thought it was kind of neat. This was before it was everywhere. So I signed
Gotcha.
up for like the monthly fee. I think it was like $15 or something. It wasn't anything ridiculous. But right after it came out, a few days later, my bank account had been hacked.
Oh,
They'd taken my debit card and tried to get a Uber or a Lyft or something like that in the town, this city that this software was developed. And they tried to go to the ATM and pull out money. Well, they stopped my card because suspicious activity. And then I end up getting my money refunded. But I was like, well, this thing is very prevalent right now. People are using it, people are paying for it. So I was like, why was I the one that got hacked? And is no one else getting hacked? And then a couple months later, I made my show or whatever, and I found other ones that I made it with that are free, and I don't mess around with it at this point. But there's too many similarities of the fact that I just gave money to this company, and then 3 days later, my card gets hacked from the same city as this company's based out of on the other side of the country.
that
So
is a little on the nose.
yeah, so I don't mess with that one, and it's one of the best ones that I think that's out there, but I don't mess with it just because of that whole situation. But certain ones do better artwork than other ones, which is weird considering they're all AI based.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the different back end for the different ones, but yeah, I've played around with a few different ones, and you're right, there's definitely a difference in quality.
But the artwork that's right now, that if you can see it on the screen of what I have, that's all AI. Even the logo is AI. I've
That's not a
embraced
real Minotaur.
I've embraced the AI overlords at this point. No, that is actually a upright walking canine with a field mouse. Very prevalent for myself, but we won't dive into that one. So, but yeah, back to the weirdness of Jersey. I know there was a lot of older stories of the Jersey Devil too. Like, what year did it? What was it the 1700s or is it the 1800s that supposedly happened?
1735 was the eponymous night in question, with Mother Leeds giving birth to her 13th child. And actually, it seems to have actually been the 13th child. Um, so Mother Leeds in the story, who supposedly proclaims, after a very difficult uh, pregnancy and birth, may this child be the devil. And then it is. The baby is born, apparently a healthy boy, but quickly transforms into, wings, claws, tail, the whole nine. Uh, Lashes out at the assembled people, and then escapes up the chimney and out into the night. And in fact, you think 13 is just like, okay, yeah, 13 is a scary number. It's got to be 13, Friday the 13th, etc. But in this case, what seems to be the truth of it is that Mother Leeds was a woman named Deborah Leeds Smith. She had had 12 children. I think like eight of them made it to adulthood. That was sort of the reality for the time. But her husband uh, by the name of Japheth Leeds. His older brother was a guy named Titan, and Titan ran the family almanac. They were publishers, kind of politically affiliated, and he gets into it with this competing almanac in Philadelphia, um, who basically starts, S posting on him to kind of get a leg up for his own business. The Leeds family had some falling out going back to um, Titan and Japheth's father, who unfortunately backed the Brits in the whole Revolutionary War thing. So family kind of got dinged for that. But the competing almanac in Philadelphia was run by a guy going by the pen name of Richard Saunders, as in Poor Richard's Almanac. And that guy was actually Ben Franklin. So we have a founding father who is directly involved in the Jersey Devil myth, which I always thought was cool and hilarious because, you picture Ben Franklin, it's the guy in the $100 bill. At this time, he was like 26 years old. So he's just, this basically this punk ass kid who is dunking on this guy to try and further his own career, and it just paints this completely antithetical picture of the Ben Franklin of legend, basically. And it was stuff to the effect of like, okay, so the Leeds Almanac would one of the things that they got in trouble with the Quakers for was quote unquote paganism, and that was basically stuff like referring to the months by August, September instead of like, month 8, month 9, stuff like that. And it was actually kind of useful information, farmer's almanac type stuff, plant your crops, this month, the weather's looking good for this year, things like that. And so Ben Franklin decided to do his own predictions. And so he basically predicted the day that Titan Leeds would die. And understandably, Titan kind of took issue with that. It's like, okay, well, that was a jerk thing to do. I didn't die. And then Ben Franklin responds with, "Oh, Titan's ghost is harassing me." Yeah, stuff like that. But all right, so how does that factor into the Jersey Devil story? So when Titan's father, Daniel, fell out with the church, they would publish stuff in the other papers and pamphlets at the time, calling him Harbinger and, Devil. So you have Devil in association with the family Leeds. And then later on, I couldn't find the direct connection to how Deborah kind of got tainted with this whole thing. As far as I could tell, she basically married into this family and had a couple of rough pregnancies. But I could kind of see a situation where, after losing a couple of children at a young age, the family could be seen as, having a bad luck or, an omen or something like that. But best anyone can tell, that's essentially how you made the connection from devil to this family. And so that Lenny Lenape forest spirit that I mentioned earlier, that legend was also circulating around the pines at that time. So something that was described as a devil, this family being described as devils, these stories kind of get bounced around back and forth until eventually, oh yeah, that forest spirit we've been talking about. Oh yeah, I think it was birthed by that family that we describe as devils. So unfortunately, the Leeds family kind of got the short end of that stick, but that seems to be how it shook out.
I don't know a whole lot about Jersey. Where exactly, I guess I could look, but where the Pine Barrens are, where is it located compared to like the bigger cities of Jersey? Is it more remote?
About as remote as you can get around here. I mean, acre for acre, we've got the highest population density of basically the rest of the US. But yeah, so if you go off of the I-95 corridor, so like if you drew a line between New York and Philadelphia, the Pine Barrens are east of that, going towards Atlantic City, the shore area.
About how many acres? I know it's fairly big, but for some reason when I think of Jersey, I don't ever think of like barrenness. I don't even New York's the same way. Like whenever I think of New York, I think of like New York City. Well, clearly that's not like Niagara Falls and all sorts of other things are in New York too. But there's been a lot of different strange things I've always heard about the Pine Barrens. But when you start to dig into these type of stories, I think everywhere has those legends. It's not just that. Like anything wooded, you hear a lot about weird things happening out in the woods. And I wonder if that's just not our natural fear of the unknown. We don't know what's out there, so we're going to be afraid of it. Or again, why are we afraid? Why are some people, this is completely my ADHD brain probably kicking on all cylinders at the moment, but why do people have fears about things that don't seem to make any correlation? Like, I don't like spiders. Why am I afraid of spiders? I don't know. Like, I don't bother them. I don't try and just kill them all. I'll leave them alone. But same thing with snakes. I'm not afraid of snakes, but a lot of people are afraid of snakes. People are afraid of clowns. Why do we get these weird phobias of stuff? And I wonder if some people just don't get it, like because of the woods, like they're afraid of that. That makes sense.
Sure. I mean, in the case of clowns, I think that is a rational reaction, but no, dangerous colors. You're no. In serious answer though, I think there's definitely a rooted reason for that. Like why do we sleep at night? Well, because our eyes are kind of shit compared to. Oh, excuse me. Is this a
You
what's
can
the
say shit. It's
custom
okay.
policy? Outstanding. Um, we got lousy eyesight at night compared to stuff like lions and bears and anything else that might be walking around the dark. So, you know, all your ancestors that found success, they slept at night. They stayed put. They didn't go venturing out in the woods. So I think, I mean, call it ancestral memory, call it instinct, maybe inherited culture to a degree, but I think there's good reasons why where we have kind of a love-hate relationship with remote areas in the forest. It's like you like the natural setting, you like being around trees, but at the same time you appreciate that there's things out there that can kill you. So
There is a show called The Missing 411. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I
They,
am.
this is me putting on the tinfoil hat now. When you start to look into a lot of these remote places, there's a lot of people that go missing. I was like, well, it's a remote place. So I can see where people could naturally just get lost. But a lot of the stuff that where people just vanish without a trace is weird. But when you start to add in the areas and you overlay the sightings of what people say are Bigfoot or something like that, weird creatures, they're all in these areas similar to where people have come up missing. If you do the thing with UFOs, you see it too. You do the things with underground like cave systems, it's the same thing too. I think that's weird. Maybe it's all just a coincidence, but it seems to be people come up missing, no traces, but yet there's also been reports of strange creatures or flying UFOs or something like weird.
And making a great case for the national park containment theory.
Well,
Yeah, you
that
hear
is,
about that one?
yeah, I don't know the whole theory in and out, but I know they claim that the national parks are basically just used to keep people out of these areas because they know what's in these parks.
Yeah. I
Which,
like that one.
which, hey, at this point in life, I'm going to probably just go ahead and say it's probably true because it wouldn't surprise me if it is.
Well, I mean, there actually, joking aside, there is something to it. It's more mundane though. It was usually like the government accidentally contaminated a site, dumped some toxic waste there, set off a couple of nukes, and it was just easier to buy it up and be like, "Oh yeah, we're waiving the environmental rules on that area. You can't go in though. Trust me, you don't want to." That's another kind of dirty side of our state. We've got the most Superfund sites per acre than any other state. Actually, I think we have the highest absolute numbers too. But there's some variety in there. Sometimes it's relatively benign stuff like a soap factory was here, so we've got some rancid stuff underground. Other times it's like there's bombs here and we don't think we got them all. We buried it. Just stay out of that area. In fact, I don't know if you ever heard of the Radium Girls. They got a Netflix show a couple
Mm-mm.
years ago.
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, the women who painted radioactive paint on watch dials and got in their mouths and stuff. They all died very horribly. That site wasn't fully cleaned up about until about 2009. So
When did
stuff
this
like that.
happen?
Like the 20 no, World War One.
Okay,
So
that's weird.
yeah, World War One going into the 20s. Yeah.
I didn't hear about that. And if I did, I guess I just didn't really pay attention. There
Yeah,
is
it wasn't something they publicized very well.
you mentioned like there's some place out that way, and I thought it was Pennsylvania for some reason, but they actually lost a nuclear weapon, like an atomic bomb somewhere. You ever heard of that?
Ooh, unfortunately, there was more than one.
Okay.
I didn't hear about Pennsylvania. I heard about one in, I think, Georgia, maybe one of the Carolinas.
Okay, maybe I'm getting those confused. But yeah,
I'm sure Pennsylvania had some goofy stuff too.
I know Pennsylvania had this weird bell thing that supposedly crashed, I think in the 60s. Or what it was like 68 or something like that. And some people claim they've seen it getting taken out by the military on a truck or something, the like acorn shape. But
Oh.
I can't think of what that place was called. But I've always kind of correlated that with them trying to build whatever the Nazis had going on in World War II with the Nazi bell. Maybe that was them testing out because at that point they'd already had the scientist over here, so who knows what they were trying to make with it.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that the whole Nazi alien spacecraft thing was actually a CIA cover op to distract everyone from the fact that we invited the Nazis over here.
Well, I have an episode that came out sometime earlier this year, and it's called The Truth About Flying Saucers. The term flying saucer was actually pushed by the military or the government or whoever you want to call it because I think that was a way for them to control the narrative. There had been reports from and I can't Kenneth Arnold. He'd seen something while he was flying, but the way he described it, he never said flying saucers. He said they looked like they were flying through there like saucer would skip across the water. And that's how the term flying saucer got pushed. And then everyone, oh, they were like discs. They're flying discs. And that's not the shape that he actually drew. They were very crescent looking. And if you look at modernized stealth vehicles, they didn't, like some of those designs, like the stealth bomber, is reminiscent to what this design was. I'm not saying they had that back in the 1940s, but who knows what they were working on.
I mean, they had flying wings at least in prototype.
Right.
Um, I forget if the Nazi flying wing actually ever got off the ground because they found like the cockpit for it and plans, but I don't know if they ever got that one flying before uh, the U.S. grabbed up the scientists and designs.
Good old Project
But
Paperclip. And then
yeah,
the one guy, Warner Von whatever, ended up making
Von
NASA.
Braun, yeah,
Yeah. Very interesting times, I guess.
had that guy in a Disney show.
How many people did that
Yeah,
guy help murder? But we're gonna give him a high ranking job over here and all sorts of stuff. Again, weird times.
yeah. You you wished you could write it off as a one-off, but yeah, it's happens with unfortunate frequency.
Hmm.
Yeah,
This
I
is
couldn't
the
find. Oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna say this is the show where I talk about whatever. So when it comes to stuff like that, for me, it's just like I'm one that doesn't trust whatever is fed to me by the media or the governments or whatever. I think there's all sorts of stuff behind the scenes. And honestly, I don't think we're supposed to know everything. I don't think we should know everything. But we do a lot of weird stuff. I think we instigate a lot of stuff. And it's just like there's not really anything you or I can do about it either. So too many people get all worked up over it, but at the end of the day, this is just business as usual. It's been going on for how many years? And I don't see it stopping anytime soon. So, but that's just me on my little opinion here. It means nothing.
Yeah, I hear you. It's no one likes being lied to or made to feel a fool. Uh,
Hmm.
especially when you take moral exception to some of the stuff you're seeing. Um, but yeah, it's like you're right. What can you do? And feeling helpless on top of that, is no good for anyone. That's why it's always good to kind of recenter and focus on the stuff you can control. How you interact with the people in your circle, and you know certainly in your case, definitely working with your audience and giving them some cool stuff to think about.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I try not to worry too much about it just because there's not anything that anyone can do. I don't personally think so. But you'd mentioned some other places in Jersey before we wrap this up that I kind of wanted to touch base on some of the weirdest locations and things that have happened, like supernatural locations or whatever. You want to dive into some of those real quick?
Sure. I think a good place to wrap us up would be, I mean, we can't talk about weird stuff in Jersey without talking about the asylums. I think, Essex County, Snake Hill, but I think my favorite must be Greystone because just the high lofted goals that went into overuse and deterioration, and then it was met with the wrecking ball in just such a inauspicious way. So, okay, so what's Greystone? It's a mental asylum in a very picturesque part of the state. It's on this nice rolling hill, open fields, beautiful view. And it was started in the whole theory of the time. This is like late 1800s, and you think, you're thinking like lunatic asylums and straitjackets, and like the worst parts, the worst cliches for mental health. And actually, at the time, their theories were pretty sound. It was get the patients in fresh air, get them interacting in a healthy way, you know, get them doing constructive things with their hands. They had like a carpentry shops and gardening, and they had patients doing productive things. And it's like, well, all right, that actually seems kind of sensible. It wasn't like lock them in a room or electrocute them or anything like that. And unfortunately, that kind of took a turn later, but at least when it started out, it was uh, pretty sound for the time, I'll say. Certainly, there's me making broad generalizations about mental health. Haha. No, but so fast forward several years, um, as often, unfortunately, seems to be the case. Oh, you've got beds and professionals. Good. We've got trouble cases we need to send you. And the hospital, originally had like 700 beds, and they, at their worst, they were forced to take on like, thousands of patients. So people in a very already distressed state of mind who now were not getting the care that they were in desperate need of. Um, there was a tuberculosis ward at one point, just a lot of very unfortunate human misery occurring within this area. And fast forward to the 90s, and the state opens a new facility, and the place gets closed down, starts deteriorating, and becomes, as often seems to be the case, a popular spot for urban explorers. And then, of course, once it's creepy and dirty, then that's when all the ghost stories start coming out. Um, you know, People supposedly, hear chains in the hallways. Oh, there's underground tunnels too. That was another one. So abandoned mental asylum, and there's subterranean tunnels running underneath it. So like, you got the whole subterranean aspect of creepy to go on top of it.
That is a weird coincidence with a lot of other places where you hear a lot of stuff like this. There's always those underground somethings. Like sometimes there's like underground springs or there's underground cave systems, or it is weird.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that whole place it was a gorgeous building too. It was something called a Kirkbride building. Just very distinctive. Like you look at this, you're looking at a Victorian era mental hospital. And unfortunately, it's not there anymore. I got demoed in 2015, despite a huge outpouring from uh, preservationists, a lot of concerned citizens, people really trying to, not necessarily the whole thing, because, in truth, it had become kind of an attractive nuisance. Those underground tunnels I mentioned became a problem in particular. Um, and so when they protested the demolition, um, they were overruled, and then they wanted to know, okay, well, why was this overruled? We had a place in the National Registry of Historic Landmarks, so like, why are you able to just ignore that? And so they got like 100 pages of documents that were like 99% redacted, and I speculation. What seems to have happened was, the powers that be had already decided that this was the way things were going to go down. The contract had already been written, and that was that, which unfortunately is kind of emblematic of New Jersey's track record with historic places. So one has to wonder if the ghosts get evicted with the demolition or if they're tied to the ground, but I don't have an answer for that.
Hmm. Weird. Is there any other places you want to talk about too? I'm just trying to figure out like some of the, for anyone out there listening, I always try and give the audience places because I find out that a lot of people are always close to some of these things, so they might learn something that they're not even sure about, and they live right around the area.
Let's see. Stuff that hasn't been demoed. Um, oh, okay. Yeah, perfect one. White Hill Mansion in Fieldsboro, New Jersey. That's near the Philadelphia area, if anyone is around there. Um, that was a mansion going back to Revolutionary War times. The second owner, Robert Field II, drowned under somewhat mysterious circumstances, and then his property transferred to his wife, and she ended up living there for many years. And today it supposedly has strange sounds at night. So I don't know if they do nighttime tours or just daytime tours, but people have done like sleepovers there. I think it was for like ghost hunter shows type thing. But White Hill Mansion, definitely worth checking out if you are interested in something spooky.
Well, we can probably wrap this one up, but before we do, where can everyone find your podcast up?
Uh, Probably the best spot would be on YouTube. Just type in Wes Verde, Wesverde. You can also find me at wesverde.com. That'll have links to all my videos, books, interesting newspaper clippings that I find. And yeah, hope you come check it out.
I guess before we wrap this up, I'm going to ask, so what really got you inspired to do all of this? Want to join this crazy world of podcasting?
Like I said, I started doing the research for the books primarily, and then I mean that kind of came out of personal interest. I didn't get to talk about the Bhutan Reservoir, which is a lake that is the former site of a town that was had some kind of again shady business deals going on there in order to produce a reservoir for Jersey City in New York. But I grew up in that area, and so I'd grown up hearing about that story, so I started researching that, and then from there, that kind of once you had kind of established the sources for looking this stuff up, you start poking around and finding other stuff, and just a lot of these interesting stories just started coming out, and it was just fun to talk about. I can only tell these things to my wife so much before I just get the eye rolls and just clearly not interested anymore. So I had to seek another audience.
I understand how that can be sometimes. Well, Wes, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure's all here, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Yep, not a problem. For anyone out there listening, make sure to check out Wes's show, and you can find more information about that in the show notes, but we're going to wrap this one up, so we'll check you on the next one. And that's the show, everyone. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversations. If you would like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to the contact section of tinfoiltales.com. Just get your message to me. We'll get something scheduled for a future episode. And just remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.
Tinfoil Tales in my headphones. Yeah, it's time to rock. Got a story about a cryptid creature. Let's take a walk. Bigfoot, dogman, they're out there in the dark. But the truth is out there like an alien spark. UFO sightings got the whole world shook. Conspiracies unfold like a story in a book. Media control, trying to keep us blind. But I'll be fool, gonna use my whole mind. In history, they don't want us to know. control, trying to keep us blind. But I won't be fooled, gonna use my own mind. In history